We'll see. No, here we go. Hello, everybody. Today's panel, we're going to talk about OTT versus direct-to-consumer distribution, how to reduce churn, build a great user experience using AI, other methods, content strategy, and then some thoughts on what the space might look like in a few years. My name is Kirby Grimes. I'm the founder of a company called 4320, which is a marketing and consulting firm. And in addition to that, I publish a weekly newsletter called The Streaming Wars, which curates the latest news, musings, and insights from around the industry. You can Google Streaming Wars newsletter. I'm sure it'll pop up number one. So that's me. We only have 45 minutes. So I want to let the panelists introduce themselves. And the easiest way to do it, let's just start with Marilyn.
Well, hello. Thank you for Thank you for inviting me to join the panel today. I'm with Bitmovin. I am leading the technical solutions integration across the United States and Latin America. And Bitmovin provides customers and developers with flexible development solutions. We've got APIs for implementing encoding, player, and analytics products.
All right, let's do Matt next.
Hey everybody, super glad to be here. I'm Matt Graham, the general manager of Acorn TV, we started in North America, focused on British mysteries and dramas, expanded into other territories around the world, both in terms of where we get the content and where we deliver it. So Australia, New Zealand, Latin America, the UK, Southern Europe. And yeah, all we do is think about content, user interface, customer satisfaction, how all these things play together. So super excited to talk about that today. Thanks.
All right, and let's do Eric.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Opeka. I'm President and Chief Strategy Officer of Cinedigm. Basically, what we do is we're a sort of broad-based streaming company that operates about 30 different brands across subscription, ad-supported, fast linear, and other business models. So looking forward to diving in today.
All right, and last but maybe not least, John.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. John Goodstead. I head up global media and entertainment sales for Roku. My team helps partners like Eric and Matt to drive acquisition, retention, engagement on our platform through paid media strategies.
All right, cool. And we may, probably not, but maybe we'll have Mike from Fox join. Unfortunately, he had to cancel the last minute, but he might pop on at the end. All right, so as a former product guy, I understand the importance of user experience. And as much as I want to say counter-narrative things like content is not king, people are using these streaming services for content. But we're all consumers, and all of us play a part in the consumer experience. So I want to phrase the first few minutes, 10 minutes of the conversation kind of about content and user experience. And Matt, let me kick this off with you, and just let me ask you, well, like, what's the importance of original exclusive content to Acorn and the brands you guys have?
Yeah, well, for us, it's everything. We're a very targeted service. We have a very sort of narrow content strategy and very, very specific audience that we serve. So our whole thing is just delivering a really great content experience, with great reliability. Right. Anytime you're in the mood for Acorn, we give you 2 or 3 options right off the bat in the main carousel that meet your mood. You have a great viewing experience. So for us, the UX, the presentation of the content, we've tried really hard to make the content sort of front and center. We don't need a lot of fancy recommendation engines because we're so targeted. We curate a really tight offering. So that's a real luxury for us. I think for services that have larger numbers, different kinds of consumer groups within them, broader offerings, that's a big challenge. And but I think that ultimately they've got to get to the same place where we're at, which is the first couple of things that you present to a consumer hits the mark and gives a really great, satisfying customer experience. So for us, we've been sort of on a journey, like a lot of other services, starting off by licensing content, getting big libraries, giving people lots of choice. And over time, we've used the data to figure out what really gives the most satisfaction, the most, what elements of the shows really make our customers the happiest. And so we started making our own shows. We make about a dozen a year now that we're producing ourselves. And those are just really dialed in. They're all our top shows. They're hitting on every mark. And that really is, I think the name of the game is making shows that align with your brand, align with the customer expectations, and deliver consistently. It's not a hits for us, at least. Subscription businesses we don't think are hits driven businesses. It's about consistency. It's about constant engagement, keeping people coming back to see fresh content month after month, or whatever your billing cycle is.
Right. And there's not many, there's not a whole lot more broad services than Roku channel. Also started licensed content, getting to originals. John, you want to talk about what Roku's doing on the original content strategy with TRC?
Yeah. So like you said, Roku channel has been around for a few years, but it was born. It's basically, just to take a step back, it's Roku's owned and operated channel. It was born out of, like you said, licensing library from a lot of our partners, and then we also have a premium subscription model as well. So you could subscribe to Showtime, or you can subscribe to now Discovery Plus through the Roku channel. And then I think it was in the beginning of last year, we acquired the Quibi library, and that was our entree into original content. And so someone who's been here at Roku for 7 years, that was certainly not something that I envisioned 4 or 5 years ago, but where the business is going, where the industry is going, was a great starting point for us. And then over the last year and now going into, we just had a new front event in New York where we announced a large list of originals that will be unveiling, including the Weird Al biopic that Daniel Radcliffe will be in. And so this is a new space for us, but we are going to be smart about it and continue to invest in this space. And it allows us to really build that original content. And we talk about acquisition and retention and so forth. Like, it allows, we see this on all other services, right? It allows those original IP, allows users to come in, and then you start to, how do you keep them in there through your library? So using a very similar playbook.
Cool. And so it's a bit odd to consider Roku a fast. First of all, I don't love the acronym soup that we have, but it's weird to call Roku fast because there's so much aspects of Roku, but there's other fasts that are bulking up the original and exclusive content offerings. And Eric, you had some thoughts on LinkedIn, I saw, about the economics of fasts and originals, didn't you?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge really in the space is that it's still a very nascent business. It's growing at an incredible clip, but from obviously a very small basis. But it's rapidly becoming some pretty viable revenue streams. I think the biggest challenge is the economics of original programming, relative to, say, linear television, which has different economics on the ad split. It has, carriage fees that support, that can be used to support programming. So I think it's, in the early stages here, it's really about it's original content is a combination of, you have other revenue streams. You may have a pay one window to help offset some of the production costs. You may have to have a branded content strategy, a licensing strategy internationally to offset it. So there's ways to do it, and parties are certainly doing it. But I think, it's kind of, if you kind of look at the evolution of cable television, the kinds of things that people can do today in FAST, the talk show, game show, reality-based nonfiction programming is, where most of the originals are today. But I think, for us, there's a couple buckets that we operate channels that range from we operate Real Madrid's linear channel globally. So we have live events and sports, which is ostensibly original in the sense that it's it's not a piece of library content. But increasingly, a lot of our brands are also subscription-based brands where we eventually window the original programming to our FAST channels. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. But I do think eventually, as the ecosystem, with more and more smart TVs shipped and the user base getting more and more comfortable and accustomed to the environment, the revenues are inevitably going to rise to levels where you'll see a greater investment in originals, and that will be us as well.
All right, so Marilyn, we have so all this exclusive content siloed across all sorts of different streaming services. In your opinion, what role does user experience play?
It's huge. So, to what people have alluded to, there's so many different apps out there. There's so many different, the customer has a pretty high expectation, and that's to find the content that they're interested in immediately across all devices, and the quality needs to be at the utmost top quality. No buffering and no latency. So there's a lot of customer expectations in terms of the user experience. It plays a huge role in acquiring customers and also retaining users. We see a lot of the video and audio quality being, more and more important to customers, to the point where even in some cases, some customers are willing to forego like a super quick startup just so they can have, a beautiful quality image to start with, or quality video to start with. So I think definitely ensuring a great customer experience is going to have that consistency across platforms, continuity across platforms, quality across platforms. Users want to pick up where they left off, regardless of what device they were watching on. And I think that's going to be key for anybody that's launching an application and streaming services today.
You mentioned something, and you mentioned like put up with a lower, I think, start time or load time. And I fight with this because like UX is my background. Like I was in UX before I was in media entertainment, and like it's such a content driven industry. Like I want to throw that counter narrative, like UX is actually king. But like if you can only get a piece of content in one interface, like are consumers willing to put up with subpar UX just to watch what they want to watch, or where they say, you know what, I don't like that show or the whole brand anymore. I'll go somewhere else. Like,
yeah,
like
I think there's a breaking point. There's a breaking point. And I think that's where analytics are really helpful. You can see where the customer is struggling, whether they're abandoning content because of, poor network conditions. Maybe the buffering is keeping their video from playing because of network conditions. But that's where I would say leveraging the analytics to make those decisions moving forward on how are your customers behaving. Are they going to abandon a stream because of poor quality, or are they willing to wait it out? It's a very delicate balance. And obviously the key is to acquire both, which is the best quality starting immediately. And there are ways to achieve that. And so that's one of the things that Bitmovin does, is working with the customers to figure out what the important factors are. So when you do have to make decisions like that, we can help.
Cool.
And look at analytics.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I think what we've seen, we sort of got to a place in North America where we were pretty comfortable with the UX and delivery speeds, and we've never been a high def service. It's always been, our customers have always been pretty happy with standard def. But then as we rolled out internationally, we realized how difficult it is to measure the quality of a user's experience in Argentina if you don't have someone in Argentina to literally like load up your app and use the app and tell you what it's like. So that's the sort of thing that we've started having to do is really like make sure we have, either through vendors or our own employees in every part of the world, using our apps on a consistent basis and telling us what the quality, from a humanistic point of view, how does it work? Is it laggy? Does it make sense? Do the navigation conventions fit those of the culture that you're in? So I think all of that, as we all move, as all these businesses invariably move more global, it just becomes exponentially more complicated to stay on top of the UX and make sure it's excellent.
And how valuable does that make, the data that you're looking at real time, like alerting and things like that, let you know when something's maybe not performing the way that it needs to, and then you can react super quickly.
Right. Exactly. We don't know, you never know where the breaking point is exactly, but as a business, it's all you're doing is presenting content to someone. They're paying you to watch your show. So if you're doing a bad job of it, you need to have some sense of what kind of a job you're doing delivering it, and try to do the best that you can. So it's a really important part of the business.
Not to name names, and it's nobody here, but I was trying to watch something yesterday on a service I pay for at night, and I couldn't get the thing to open. So it was an early night for me. So
yeah,
definitely. John, let me ask you this. You guys have content you have your own, but you have content from nearly everywhere else. And is the value prop of the Roku channel, is there too many streaming services?
I think that there are a lot of services. Yeah, we have I think there's 14,000 channels on the platform. But I do think that the work that we do on our platform with Roku, on the UX as well, in terms of always making it a consumer first experience and allowing that content discovery through different, through what we call the streamer's journey is really, and so our job as for the UX team, but then from our side as well, is how do we shorten that consumer decision journey? And so we call it the the 4 S's, right? And so it's like when the select is first when you kind of unbox it, right? And then if everyone's used Roku before, we make basically fill out a survey and there's content recommendations, and so that's that first part of it, right? Then you get to, okay, what am I going to select? What type of content am I going to select? And then you have that home screen, and then we start to serve our banners and so forth using our rich first party data to really intercept that user as they're decisioning on content. So we have that ability. And then once you lean back, you kind of sit back, then you're sitting back and you're streaming. And then we start to use our video inventory, sight, sound, and motion to allow partners to make recommendations and allow the user to kind of build their menu, their list. And then the last one is kind of interesting, what we've called the surround, because remember, they're not always on their TV, right, or their device. And so then it starts to, how can we reach them and create that FOMO when they're not on their TV screen? So that's through cross-device, retargeting, email marketing, et cetera. And so if we can accomplish that and work with our partners to really shorten that decision journey, that it makes it a little less complicated and takes a little of the pressure off of the consumer.
John, the partners that you're working with, is it primarily like partners that are their business on the Roku channel, or also app partners as well?
No, these are, I'm talking about, my team works with all of the channel partners like Matt and Eric's side. Okay. in terms of helping. Now, this is, we're working with all of anything from Disney Discovery to AMC to Acorn to Cinedigm, and helping them be successful on the platform using that streamer journey.
Cool. All right. So Matt and Eric, and I was going to ask Mike this too. Very excited about this question. I mean, you have your own direct-to-consumer apps. You also have channel silos or channel businesses on the Roku channel and other outlets. In your opinion, what do you find more value in, product or distribution? Whoever wants to take that first, so you kind of drop it with your name.
I'll go first. You know, it's what's interesting is, you know, we've been through quite an evolution. When we first launched into streaming, I want to say in about 2014, I mean, we were doing things with AdRise before it was Tubi, but in, you know, 2013, 2014. But if you really, when we really started to lean into it was around 2015. And we did what everybody did at that point. It was probably a, you know, direct to consumer, mobile centric approach. Smart TVs were completely underpowered. So it was a mobile and tablet centric universe. And I think one of the decisions that we made was really predicated by what we saw out of Amazon channels, which is, and coming from a lot of people on the team's experience in sort of classic television distribution, is that, you know, that this, you know, what as a small company you give up with in terms of user control, data, and other things, the trade-off is a substantially greater base of customers at a lower OpEx and better margins. So we leaned very heavily into that route in 2017, 2018, and it's paid off in terms of us being just a much bigger company, a more profitable company. And so, you know, I look at the current environment in FAST that we're seeing is really a continuation of that. So I would say that doesn't mean that we preclude doing direct-to-consumer activities. We own our own infrastructure. We see it as a vital and important piece of the mix, and it gives us the richest data, the best, you know, user experience for the users that we can control. But you know, we have really sort of leaned into the distributed side. I think that makes sense for, you know, smaller companies relative to the huge general entertainment behemoths. It's not only it's a fiscally beneficial and responsible path, but I also think it enables us to do things on direct to consumer that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So that's just a little take on our experience and our sort of philosophy behind it.
Boy, that was really well said. I agree 100%. We're coming at it from a very similar place. I would say, you know, in a nutshell, we think a balanced portfolio makes sense. You want to have as many consumers, obviously for us, and I think for any streamer, you know, your D2C subscribers should be your highest lifetime value. Otherwise, you're doing something wrong, right? You have the most touch points, the best control. You should have the best user experience for them. But you know, there's no question that you know, partners like Roku or Amazon have reach into households that is really expensive to get by yourself. So I think having a balanced portfolio, ultimately, you need to be able to, you know, you want to be able to, you know, when it's time to negotiate, you need to have a walk away, right? You need to be able to survive not being on one of these partnerships. You hope it never gets to that, but you ultimately need to be diversified. So yes, I think it's just a question of investing in your own apps, in your own audience, but then also leaning into the partnerships that you have, because if they're good ones, they work for everybody and do a heck of a lot to grow the business, just like Eric said.
And on the direct to consumer side, Marilyn, I mean, tell me about owning the customer relationship and first party data. Why that would be so important?
There's a lot in the data. So whoever has that has the ability to control that. You know, what's being served to the customer. And then, you know, if you're looking at data from the app side, we were talking about user experience. You can take that, you can look at, you know, leveraging that for algorithms behind the scenes that will bring content up to the surface that's relevant to the customers, that's relevant to the users. So I think that, you know, it's going to be important to stay on top of what the customer wants, As far as direct-to-consumer apps, the more apps that are out there, the better. I think that there's plenty out there, and it just allows that flexibility for customers to download the app if they want. They can subscribe directly to that service. For BitMoven, we're pretty agnostic in terms of whether there's bundles of services going out or whether it's a direct-to-consumer. We're flexible in terms of that. But I think that direct-to-consumer, it's obviously huge because of the control that you have, the data that you get, and the agility that you have to make changes to those apps based on that customer experience and their user behaviors.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Kirby, could I jump in on that? Oh, hey.
Of course,
Michael.
of course.
Yeah, I agree with Marilyn. I mean, that's always been a big differentiator for Roku, having access to that rich first-party behavioral data. It's more accurate. It allows for, like Marilyn's touching on, which is really, the personalization, the accuracy of it, and then also rich customer insights. So again, when we're working with our channel partners, I mean, they really want access to that behavioral data that we have. And then also, as we move away into this cookieless world, it's going to be even more relevant for this select group of platforms and so forth that have this first party data. So that's always been a big differentiator and will continue to be moving forward.
Mike, I'm gonna throw you right in. I don't even know if your audio works at all, but what we're talking about is basically, I'll use Fox Nation as an example. You have a direct-to-consumer app. You also could get that experience through the Roku channel. And I mean, there definitely is a value prop for single interface, single bill. So why would somebody use? And I'll ask all you this, but I'll ask Mike to start you off. Like, do you have like a unique selling proposition? Why I would go sign up with Fox Nation versus just get it through Roku channel that I'm already signed up and have other services with? Like, what's the value? What's the selling prop there?
Yeah, hopefully my audio is working. Okay, great. Firstly, I am so sorry for being so late. I was completely tried my hardest not to be late, but it just happened last minute earlier today.
How dare you work?
I know it was totally out of my control. I apologize, but I'll just say, I mean, it's a really good question. The way I think about it is a little bit differently. Not so much why would a user do this versus that, but for me, it's more like if you're selling something, you're gonna want to be on every shelf of every store. You don't want to be like, oh, just exclusively on one place versus another. But then there is another place that sort of also, as a user, I mean, because I'm also thinking of the user all the time, I do think it's like almost a little bit confusing for them that the services exist in so many different places at the same time. So they may download the app. And again, we just think of the average user rather than somebody who's like really into technology and reads about all the different applications and launches all the time, like we all do. When they do sort of like subscribe to something, they may be downloading the app on Roku, then subscribing through Roku, through the actual application, but they may think it's their Roku thing. And then, it's super confusing for the user that we are everywhere anyway, and that even within their own platform, there's multiple ways to access them. And I do think it's hard. It's a really hard problem to solve right now. But I do still think that we should be everywhere. We kind of like need to be everywhere to make sure that there's any sell through is available to the user, they're able to get to it.
How about Matt? Is there like a core difference of like why I would obviously you want to be everywhere, but like why would I? Is there a reason? Like, are the experiences equal, or in your opinion, is there something more I'm getting by using?
Yeah, the experience you have with Acorn through a partner varies widely from partner to partner and with the D2C apps, right? So everyone has their different interfaces, and I would say that generally you're going to get a more curated experience with Acorn. So if you're with the D2C apps, I should say. So if you're a hardcore fan and your decision is I'm in the mood for Acorn, but I'm not sure exactly which style of programming I want, you're going to have probably more success finding that subgenre through our D2C app than you are through some of our partners. It's just a little bit easier because it's very difficult for a partner who's got 14,000 different streaming services on the platform to have to curate all that content as efficiently as we can with our very singular service. So I think really for us, it's like core fans, people who are really love the service. They just want to be close to it. They want that direct experience. But we certainly wouldn't, and I think our hope is, sort of to Michael's point, we want people to get the service wherever it's convenient, wherever they come across it, and we want them to have a great experience there. So our goal is never we don't want our partners to have a lesser experience or a lesser offering. It's just we just happen to have more control through our apps.
Yeah, I would just touch on, I know you probably brought up Roku because I'm here, but you could talk about Amazon or any of the other platforms. But I would say, with what Michael and Matthew said is, and it goes back to your question you asked before, Kirby, is like, are there too many services out there, right? And so by being on the Roku, within the Roku channel, the idea is it becomes an aggregator, right? It becomes one single consumer viewing experience with actually one payment method as well, all within one. And I think that is kind of where the future will be, right? Because there's just so many options out there. So it gives a little more flexibility for where to find it. And then also, if we talk about how users are more focused on content now, maybe not so much the specific app or channel, then once they finish, they have that ability to start to find what's next in just this one area versus trying to go maybe luckily find each of these services by using search or other ways.
Right on. Eric, anything to add there?
Yeah, well, I wanted to kind of go back to your comment earlier today, right? Was I was just thinking about this whenever that conversation of how many streaming services are too many, are there, and things like this. I try to think back and remind myself that there's over 33,000 television channels around the world, and each one serving different geographic, cultural, government, other needs, right? So I think, and in streaming, I think there's room for that same level of diversity of programming. And so I think, as companies that really are, we're an enthusiast company, right? So for us, it's about ubiquity of access and being everywhere that consumer is going to want a touch point with the content. So I think, for a company in our space, ubiquity and broad availability is really the key, and I think that's been a significant ingredient to our success. In fact, we've been, sometimes we maybe to a fault go on even too small platforms, mostly because we want to support the whole ecosystem. But some of those have turned out to be, some pretty big players over the years.
Yeah. And I mean, on that note, good job, because every time I see a new platform, like, you're already on it. So that's kudos, I guess. But yeah, you always seem to be there first. And John, you mentioned something. I think this is one of the questions, and I think about kind of Eric was thinking about cable channels, and I know there's some studies. This predates my time in the industry. I don't know when this was, but like, do people care about the channels, or do they care about the content on the channel? So in the same vein, like, do all of you feel like people have more affinity towards the content or the actual apps that are carrying the content?
Did anyone? You want to go, Marilyn? Go first. Yeah, I've got.
I was going to say I could speak to that. I think everyone has always said, everyone's always said content is king, and that's always been, that's a term that we've used in the industry from my entire time, which is over 20 years, and I think everyone is still fighting for eyeballs. And now with all the originally produced content that's out there, it makes the competition even greater, because it's not just a network competing against another network. It's a program against a program. And I don't know that customers necessarily care who's serving the programming that they want to see, as long as they can get to it. One of the things that Roku has done really well, and I say this, John, not just because you're on the call, but as an aggregator, when you go in and you're looking at all the apps that you've downloaded, there's like 1,500 or twice that maybe apps available for the platform. And if I want to look for a specific type of content, I know that I can type that in, and I can find the content that's going to be relevant to me. So that's going to be increasingly important, I think, as the future holds more and more apps, more content. And I'm sure that more channels will launch with even more specific niche content. And we're seeing a huge explosion with the like e-fitness and e-learning and social media platforms with video streaming. So it's still the content. It's who is providing the content that the customer wants to see. And we saw a huge uptick in HBO with their Game of Thrones, and then they had to keep and retain those customers. How did they do that? They were looking at, you know, more content to keep those customers engaged with their brand. So I still think it's content.
Yeah, I second that, third that. We've been following this trend very closely, and we clearly see that consumers are more loyal to the content than the brands. We actually just did we've been in the field and conducting surveys, and one of the results was 60% of the participants said that they select a service if they see a title that they want to watch, a movie, a show, and they'll always continue to go with where that content is versus staying loyal to that service. And so it's really more about if they've got the menu, if that, you know, they'll stay, but otherwise they're going to move. And I think we saw that. I think there's been a lot, you know, a great example was Yellowstone, where there was a lot of confusion on where that content was, but the user is going to go wherever they can find that show or that movie they want to watch. So certainly agree with you there, Marilyn.
And the winner is going to be that consistent experience too, I think, across platforms. So you're looking for a piece of content that could be served up by multiple different apps and different providers. So it's going to be a matter of the customer locating the app or service that has the programming. It's almost like we're doing the same thing now with the apps that we've always done with the content, which is try to elevate the content. Well, now it's elevate the app that has the content.
So I'll jump in. I'll just say I think there are obviously different tiers in the ecosystem, and if you're talking about the A+ tent poles that all the big streamers are putting out, absolutely, people are jumping around looking for those shows. They've heard about it, the sort of, you know, whatever is the water cooler effect, whatever it is, those big shows like Yellowstone, people are, where is it? You know, they want to go and find that show. Where Acorn operates, and I think where a lot of the channels that Eric's company operates at is, as he said, the enthusiast level, where what it's really about curation. And I think there's a lot more opportunity there because there's so much content. So I think there's a brand opportunity to say we represent a certain style and sensibility of content that you appreciate and you like, and we're going to consistently deliver that to you. So then you develop a relationship with that brand. So I tell you, like, I work on Acorn TV, right? When I started it, the big question is, what do we do with this name? Like Acorn TV, what does that even mean, right? Every day we get dozens of people saying, I love Acorn TV because of that consistency, because of that curation. So it's different levels. I think it's great that the ecosystem's still developing. I think there's room for, you know, both things are true. It is the content, but it's also going to be the brands. Ultimately, the brands are all going to have to stand for something if they're going to be, if they're going to have value.
Yeah, it's super interesting because these are like all great points, and it's great to hear them. It's like it's almost like a more complex problem in my head a little bit because always go back to like key performance indicators. Like when we talk about apps or we talk about experiences in general, So I do think there is probably like one layer where you can say, yes, the big shows, people go to that application or that brand that they recognize because that big show is what's bringing them in. And then there is like another question that always comes up, and it's like, so why stay in the experience where they got to produce more great shows, of course, but like if the experience itself wasn't great, if the app kept crashing or the content wasn't working well or the audio was out of sync or everything else that the product does that sort of compiles the experience, then that user would either get sick of the experience and go somewhere else, or they would seek that content through some other channel. So that's like one sort of layer. The other layer about another key performance indicator is like the recommendations and all the features that you bring in. So after you finish this great show and this great movie, what else can you do to keep that user in your application for as long as possible? And again, that's the product in marriage, in sort of a good marriage with the content. And then outside of those two, the question always sort of brings itself to me is like, but then sometimes it's not about the content, right? It's about like, do you pay for it or not? As an example, so your expectations are always going to be different if you're paying $20-something a month for a service versus not paying for one. And then there is another layer, which is like, well, people spend, again, going back to key performance indicators, people spend hours watching TikToks. I mean, you can't tell me the content is always great, right? It's actually not that great a lot of the time, but it's very entertaining and they pass the time. Now, they're not paying for it. It's very mobile friendly. It really suits the experience inside the mobile application extremely well. It serves a different type of purpose, and it doesn't cost anything. It costs you internet and battery life. So it's like, to me, it's not like, is it content versus product? Because I don't think it's ever one versus another, or one's more important than another. Content is obviously king, but it is more difficult than that to answer that question in my head. There's these layers that you keep going down and just figure out which one of those are you trying to answer.
So Mike, let's say, obviously content is what drives all of us. I mean, we're all consumers to a service, but it's also a role of a service is to entertain us too. So after I'm done with Bridge and Tunnel or whatever I went into Epics for, like, what are you doing to keep me discovering new content, make Epics now something habitual that I now use after consuming what I originally went there for? Like, what are some tactics that you're using?
Right. So I left Epics about 1.5 years ago.
I'm sorry, Epics, and that's obviously where I met you from. But like, let's say Fox now.
Yeah,
going for Tucker Carlson or something.
Yeah. No. It's so one. There's I think for any brand that's sort of like building its own direct to consumer product, one of the sort of the key things that would always work is understanding the data and collecting the right amount of data. So having a goal is always great. Like, the goal is, I want as many subscribers as possible, or I want to keep those subscribers subscribing for as long as possible, or I want those people to stay in the application or in watching as much content as possible. The big indicators that you'd have. And then from there, you need to sort of like ask yourself the right questions. And only through those questions is like, well, how do we keep them in the app for as long as possible? We'll need better features. What is their experience look like now? How, once they finish a piece of content, how do we keep them? How do we get them to find the content that's relevant to them? Again, through personalization and recommendation. And then once they've sort of went over that hurdle, how do we keep them watching the next piece and the next piece, and sort of like create almost like a habit of staying, like to your point, of staying inside the application. And I do think it's got to do with a lot of experimentation and using those experiments and understanding how you're failing and how you're doing well. And the data tells you that. The user will tell you you're not doing well. They'll go on the App Store, or they'll write you an email and tell you how bad you're doing when they don't like you. And then they will tell you when they like you, they may either be quiet or just like give you a star rating, but like they're not going to be as excited about it. So I actually think that the customer themselves are a great data point to sort of drive you a lot of the time.
I've gotten handwritten letters about complaints in the mail.
Yeah, it's actually, I think that the customer knows best. I think it's really true though. They're brilliant. I get so many stuff in it, and I do this, and I've done this in my last role. In this role, is I will actually, when I get a really well thought through written email or review, I will reach out and see if they were willing to spend some time with me on a Zoom call to tell me more. Now, they really care so much that they've written. Speak to the customer, like ask them more questions, ask them more about themselves. Do they know about you? Do they know that your app is on TV and on a mobile device? Like, do they know? Are you making it easy for them? Or are you just taking all those things for granted? And that's kind of like part of it for me, is like really discovering things with the customer and giving them the time, and they love it. They appreciate it so much that you would do that, and I love their time. So I completely appreciate it myself.
Yeah, that's so right. It's always so invigorating when you remember there's a real person on the other side there who is really enjoying your content or frustrated or whatever it is.
Yeah,
it really grounds you in your work. Yeah.
Really
well, it could be too. It comes down to if you're offering content and competing with someone else who's offering that content or something similar, what other things do you need to look at? You need to improve your insights into the user sessions, understand details around any errors that might occur, because then once you get past that content piece, it's quality of experience. Because what makes you the service that subscriber wants versus someone else who might serve similar content. And I think it's going to be, listening to the customer, just like what Michael said. That's extremely important. We're always, our motto is think through the customer lens. Everything that we do, we're trying to think about, okay, what is the customer going to want, expect, look for in the service? So when you're looking at the quality of that customer experience as a differentiating factor, because there's so much content out there and it's so easy to get to for the most part, the quality of that experience is going to be key in the retention of that customer.
All right, so Nextv is running a tight ship. That's all, but I'll leave with some parting words. Listen to the customer. Some people want to go to the grocery store, such as the Roku channel, to get everything in one place. Some people want to go use Dove channel. They want to go to the boutique. Leverage partnerships, leverage analytics, content, still king, but UX, almost just as important. All right, thank you panelists. Thank you, Nextv. I'll see everyone soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.